Here's something that's going to irritate every in-ground gardener in your life. A container of tomatoes on a patio, managed correctly, can outproduce the same variety planted directly in your backyard soil. Not by a little, sometimes by a lot. And the reason has nothing to do with luck or magic soil mix from some boutique garden center. It's about control. Containers give you something ground planting never can: total environmental authority over the root zone. But here's the frustration most container gardeners run into. They treat their pots like tiny versions of a garden bed. Same thinking, same watering schedule, same planting depth. And then they stand there in July wondering why everything looks sad and stunted while their neighbor's in-ground patch is exploding. Say, by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly which 12 vegetables and perennials actually perform better in containers than in the ground. And more importantly, you're going to know why and how to set each one up to prove it.
Before we get started, be sure to check out the plants, tools, and products featured in this video. Everything you need is linked right in the description below.
I've got a bonus tip at the end of this video that genuinely surprised me when I first tested it. It involves something most of you already have in your kitchen right now, and it can increase your fruiting yield in a single growing season without changing a single thing about your soil mix. Stay for it. It's the kind of thing that sounds too simple to be real, and then you try it once and you never go back. If you're into growing more food in less space, with less guesswork, you're in the right place. Subscribe and hit the bell if you want videos that skip the filler and get straight to what actually works in the garden. Alright, let's get into the list. Tip 12. Lettuce and salad greens. Let's start with the one that shocks people the most, because lettuce seems like the most garden bed plant in the world. Wide, shallow, needs a lot of it to feed a family. That's the assumption. Here's why the assumption is wrong. Lettuce has a shallow root system. It doesn't need depth. It needs consistent moisture and temperature regulation. And that is almost impossible in an open garden bed during a warm spring that turns hot faster than you expected. In the ground, and a heat spike at soil level fries the roots and triggers bolting before you've harvested a single full head. In a pot, you can move it. Partial shade in the afternoon. Cooler microclimate on the north side of your porch. You're not at the mercy of the fixed position of a bed. Set this up in a wide, shallow container. You want at least 8 inches deep, but 24 inches wide if you can manage it. And plant in a tight cluster. Cut and come-again varieties like black-seeded Simpson or oak leaf will give you multiple harvests off the same planting. If you skip the shade management on hot days, you're going to get bitter, bolted lettuce in 3 weeks. I've done it. You harvest one salad, and then it turns into a bitter, spindly thing you wouldn't feed to a goat. That's number 12. 11 more to go. And the further we get down this list, the more counterintuitive it gets. Tip 11. Radishes. Radishes feel almost too easy for this list, but they earn their spot for a specific reason that most gardeners don't think about. In a garden bed, radishes are a gamble. Soil that isn't perfectly loose and rock-free will produce deformed roots, forked, stunted, cracked radishes that technically exist but aren't what you planted them for. Rocks, compacted soil, even a small clump of clay can redirect the taproot and produce something that looks like a cartoon vegetable. In a container with a proper loose mix, I use a blend of about 60% potting mix, 30% perlite, and 10% vermiculite. Every single radish comes out smooth, straight, nicey, and sized correctly. You control the medium entirely. The other thing, radishes mature in 25 to 30 days. In a container, you can do successive plantings in the same pot all season long. Pull one crop, drop in fresh seed, add a handful of compost, water it in. That pot is earning its square footage constantly. Consequence you want to avoid: don't let them stay in the pot past maturity. They get pithy and hollow fast. Harvest the moment the shoulder starts peeking above the soil surface. Tip 10. Bush beans. Most people put beans directly in the ground because they grow fast and seem like a bulk crop. And in the ground, they're fine. But here's what container growing does for bush beans that ground growing doesn't. Drainage. Absolute aggressive drainage. Bush beans hate wet feet more than almost any vegetable. Whereas, a rainy week in a poorly drained bed will rot the roots, and you won't even know it happened until the plant just stops. It looks okay from the top, and then it dies without explanation. In a container with drainage holes and a light mix, excess water is gone in minutes after rain. The roots stay healthy. The plant keeps producing. You want a pot that's at least 12 inches deep for bush beans, not because the roots go deep, but because you need the volume to buffer temperature. Shallow pots superheat in midsummer and stress the plant right when it should be setting pods. Plant 4 to 6 seeds per 12-inch container. They grow close well. Harvest every 2 to 3 days once pods start coming, because if you let them go to seed on the plant, production stops. The plant thinks it's done its job. To add one specific thing I do that makes a measurable difference. I lay a piece of shade cloth over the pot, not the plant, just the pot, during the hottest part of July. Keeps the root zone temperature from spiking. Takes 30 seconds. Makes the difference between a plant that produces through August and one that quits in mid-July. Tip 9. Scallions and green onions, low drama. High output. This is the vegetable that should be in every container gardener's rotation and somehow always gets left off the list. Green onions need almost no space. 6 inches of depth, a container as small as a 6-inch pot, and you've got a perpetual snipping station outside your kitchen door. Plant them in a cluster, snip from the top, and they regrow from the base. One planting gives you months of harvests. In a garden bed, green onions tend to get lost. And they're small, they're delicate, they compete poorly with neighboring plants and weeds. In a container, there's no competition. The root zone is theirs alone. They grow faster, they stay cleaner, and you actually use them because they're within arm's reach of the kitchen. Try this. Plant a pot of scallions with a pot of basil right next to each other near your kitchen entrance. You will use herbs more often if they're inconveniently close to where you cook. That's not a gardening tip, that's a behavioral one, and it works. Tip 8. Mint. I'm going to say something that in-ground gardeners already know and will completely agree with. Mint does not belong in the ground. It belongs in a container. Full stop. Mint spreads underground via runners with a determination that I can only describe as personal. It will take over a raised bed in 2 seasons. It will infiltrate neighboring plants. It will come up in places you didn't plant it, and it will not stop. I once pulled a mint plant out of a bed and found runners extending 18 inches in 3 directions. In a container, all of that aggressive energy is redirected upward. The plant focuses on leafy growth because it literally cannot go anywhere else. You get dense, productive mint without the garden bed takeover. Grow it in at least a 12-inch pot to give it room to produce without stressing the roots. Keep it consistently moist. It likes partial shade in hot climates. Full sun in summer will scorch the leaves. One detail worth noting: don't let a mint container sit in a saucer of standing water. It's a thirsty plant, but standing water still invites root rot. That's number 8. And we've got 7 more, and we're getting into the ones where the yield data genuinely surprises people. TP7, Spinach and Swiss chard. Here's the pattern interrupt in this list. Spinach is cold season. Swiss chard is heat tolerant. I'm putting them together because they share the same container superpower. They let you extend your season in both directions in ways that a fixed bed simply cannot. In early spring, you can put a pot of spinach outside before your last frost date. If a freeze threatens, you bring it in for the night. Done. No row cover, no scrambling. The container is your protection mechanism. Chard in midsummer. When your bed is cooking under direct sun and the soil temperature is running hot, a chard container can go to a north-facing side of the house for the hottest weeks. It keeps producing. A chard plant in a bed has nowhere to go. Container size: 12 inches deep, 14 to 16 inches wide, works for a 3-plant chard setup. Spinach you can grow denser, 6 to 8 plants in a 16-inch container. The thing I noticed after doing this for a few seasons, my container chard consistently outlasted my bed chard by 3 to 4 weeks into summer, just from moving it to afternoon shade. That's weeks of extra harvest from one adjustment. Tip 6. Cucumbers. Okay, pause, because this one is going to get pushback. Cucumbers need space. They sprawl. They're not a container plant. That's the conventional wisdom, and it's mostly wrong if you do this right. Cucumbers are heavy producers, and they do well in containers when 2 conditions are met. You use a compact or bush variety, Space Master, bush pickle, patio snacker, and you give them a vertical trellis inside the container itself. Why does this work? Because cucumbers are not limited by root space the way people think. They're limited by water access and temperature consistency. Both of those are easier to control in a container. Cucumber roots are actually relatively compact compared to the plant above ground. The consequence of skipping the trellis: the plant collapses under its own weight. Fruit touches the container edge, disease pressure spikes, and you get cracked cucumbers. The trellis keeps airflow around the fruit and keeps everything off surfaces. Use a 5-gallon container minimum per plant. I usually go 7-gallon. Set a 48-inch stake or wire cage inside the container before you plant so you don't disturb the roots later. Water consistently. Cucumbers drop fruit production fast when they experience water stress. Tip 5. Strawberries. The midpoint of this list, and also the midpoint of this video. Before we go further, that bonus tip I mentioned at the top, we're going to get to it at the end, and I want to remind you what it is, because I've been thinking about how to frame it. It's a single household item, used in a specific way, that essentially tricks your fruiting plants into thinking they're under mild stress, and their response to that mild stress is to produce more fruit. The mechanism behind it is genuinely interesting. Don't bail before we get there. Alright, strawberries. Strawberries are one of those plants where container growing isn't just comparable to in-ground. It's legitimately superior in most climates. Here's why. Strawberries produce runners. In the ground, those runners go everywhere. The planting becomes a tangled mess in season 2, and disease pressure from soil splashback onto the berries increases dramatically. Botrytis, gray mold, loves a berry sitting close to damp soil. In a container, the plant is elevated, airflow is better, and you can redirect or remove runners intentionally. The other massive advantage: overwintering. In colder zones, strawberries in the ground need heavy mulching to survive, and they often don't. A container can go into a garage or shed when temperatures drop. You protect a valuable perennial plant with almost no effort. Best container setup: a classic hanging basket or a standard 12-inch pot per plant. Ever-bearing varieties: Seascape, Albion, Ozark Beauty will give you multiple flushes across the season rather than one heavy June crop. Tip 4. Peppers. Peppers and containers are a match that not enough people talk about. Here's the consequence framing first. If you plant peppers in the ground in a climate with variable spring temperatures, late cold snaps will set them back weeks. Every time a pepper plant experiences a temperature stress event below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, it stalls. It doesn't die. It just stops and resets. You lose time you can't get back. In a container, you see a cold snap coming and you move the plant. Bring it inside for 2 nights. Put it back out. The plant never missed a beat. Beyond cold protection, peppers actually respond well to the slight root constraint of a container. They're not a plant that needs unlimited root run. A 5-gallon container per pepper plant is enough. What they need more than space is heat. They love warm root zones, and a dark-colored container in full sun actually helps in cooler climates. Use a 3-gallon pot if you have a compact variety like an ornamental pepper or a cayenne. Go 5-gallon for bells, poblanos, banana peppers. 1 plant per container. don't crowd them. Personal note, I've been overwintering my pepper plants in containers for 3 years now. I bring them inside before first frost, cut them back to the main stem, water sparingly through winter, and put them back out in spring. By July of their second year, they're producing at a volume a first-year plant never matches. Container growing is what makes that practical. Tip 3. Blueberries. We're into perennials now, Nicaecerant. And blueberries might be the most compelling case on this entire list for container superiority. Here's the thing about blueberries that stops most gardeners before they even start. pH. Blueberries require acidic soil in the 4.5 to 5.5 range. Most garden soil sits around 6.5 to 7.0. Amending a whole bed to that pH level, and keeping it there, is a multi-year project involving sulfur, peat, pine bark mulch, and constant testing. It's genuinely difficult. In a container, you fill it once with the right mix, ericaceous compost, pine bark fines, a little peat, and you're done. The pH stays stable because there's no surrounding soil to counteract it. Your blueberry plant gets exactly what it needs from day one. The consequence of planting blueberries in unamended soil, they'll grow. They'll look fine. They'll almost never produce fruit worth harvesting, because the plant under nutrient stress can't support berry production at any meaningful level. Use a 15 to 20 gallon container for a mature blueberry. They get big, but they're perennials. This is a one-time setup for a decade plus of fruit. Plant 2 different varieties for cross-pollination. Sunshine Blue and Top Hat are great compact options for containers. One oddly specific detail that matters here. When you water blueberries in containers, use rainwater if you can collect it, or filtered water. Tap water in many regions is slightly alkaline. Over time, consistent alkaline watering will push your container pH up and undo the work you did in your mix. A $15 pH meter used monthly will save you a lot of frustration. Tip 2. Herbs. Basil, rosemary, thyme, oregano. I'm grouping these because they share a container advantage that's so important it deserves its own explanation. Mediterranean herbs, basil, rosemary, thyme, oregano, evolved in conditions that most garden beds in North America cannot replicate. Thin soil, excellent drainage, heat, low humidity around the roots. These plants don't just tolerate lean, fast-draining conditions, they require them. Rich, moisture-retaining garden soil does to Mediterranean herbs what an overwatered houseplant goes through. Slow root rot, leggy growth, weak flavor. In a container with a lean mix, 50% potting mix, 50% perlite for rosemary and thyme, slightly richer for basil, you can nail the conditions they actually want. The flavor consequence here is real. A basil plant grown in perfect drainage and moderate nutrition produces leaves with higher essential oil concentration. That's the flavor. Overwatered, overfed basil is big and green and tastes like nothing. Rosemary especially is worth container growing in zones 7 and below because you can bring it inside before a hard freeze. A well-established rosemary that's been growing for 2 or 3 years is a genuinely valuable plant. Protecting it through winter in a container is easy. Losing it to a freeze because it was in the ground is depressing. Tip 1. Tomatoes. Of course it's tomatoes. It was always going to be tomatoes. But the reason they top this list isn't what you think. Everyone knows you can grow tomatoes in containers. The question is, can you get better results than in-ground? And the answer, Jess, with the right variety and setup, is yes, for a specific reason. Early blight, Septoria leaf spot, verticillium wilt. These are the soil-borne diseases that devastate in-ground tomato crops in established gardens. Once they're in your soil, they're in your soil. Rotation helps, but in a backyard garden with limited space, true rotation isn't always possible. Year 3 or 4 in the same bed, and your tomatoes start coming up sick before they've barely started. In a container with fresh potting mix every season, you're starting clean. No soil-borne pathogen carryover. No disease pressure from last year's planting. Every season is a reset. Add to that the mobility advantage, move the container to maximize sun exposure as the season changes, and back it up against a south-facing wall for extra heat reflection in cooler climates. And you've got a setup that ground planting simply cannot match. Variety selection matters enormously here. Bush or determinate varieties, celebrity, patio, bush, early girl, are built for containers. Indeterminate varieties can be done, but you need a 15-gallon container minimum and a serious stake or cage. Water consistently. Tomatoes in containers dry out faster than in-ground plants, and inconsistent watering is the #1 cause of blossom end rot and cracking. Don't let the soil go fully dry between waterings. A moisture meter is worth the $10 you'll spend on it. All right, you stayed. Here it is. The household item is plain old aspirin, specifically uncoated aspirin, the cheap generic kind, 81 milligrams, the kind that costs about $4 for a bottle of 90 at any pharmacy. Here's what you do. Dissolve 1 tablet in 1 gallon of water. Use it to water your container tomatoes, peppers, or cucumbers once every 2 to 3 weeks during the active growing and fruiting season. Now here's why this isn't just a garden folktale. Aspirin is acetyl salicylic acid. When plants absorb salicylic acid, it triggers a defense response called systemic acquired resistance, which, in plain language, means the plant thinks it's under mild threat and essentially goes into high alert. It ramps up its immune system. It produces more disease-fighting compounds. It accelerates certain growth processes. Here's the part that's relevant to yield. One of the side effects of this defense activation is increased production of flowers and fruit. The plant is, in a biological sense, trying to reproduce before whatever threat it perceived can stop it. More flowers, more fruit set, more yield. Multiple university studies, including work out of Cornell and Clemson, have documented measurable increases in disease resistance and yield in tomato plants treated with diluted salicylic acid solution. This isn't pseudoscience, it's plant biology. The container advantage here is that you're delivering it directly to the root zone of a single plant in a controlled volume, with no dilution loss across a wide bed. The effect is more concentrated and consistent. 1 aspirin, 1 gallon of water, every 2 to 3 weeks. Don't overdo it. Higher concentrations can inhibit plant growth rather than stimulate it. Stick to 1 tablet per gallon. Key: I started doing this 3 seasons ago after reading the Cornell research. The first year I tested it side by side, same variety, same container size, same mix, same everything, except 1 plant got the aspirin water and 1 got plain water. The aspirin plant set fruit noticeably earlier and produced more over the course of the season. Could have been other variables, but I kept doing it, and the results have been consistent enough that it's now a permanent part of my container routine. That's the bonus. Simple, cheap, rooted in real plant science, and sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. So, here's where we landed today. 12 vegetables and perennials that don't just survive in containers, they thrive in containers because of what containers give you that the ground never can. Control, mobility, disease reset, drainage, soil, pH, precision. These aren't compromises, they're advantages. If you're a container gardener and someone in your life has implied you're doing some lesser version of gardening, bookmark this video and send it to them quietly. No comment needed. Now here's the question I want to hear from you in the comments. Which one of these 12 surprised you most? Because I get that tomatoes at #1 feels obvious in hindsight, but I'm curious whether blueberries or cucumbers or one of the others landed differently than you expected. Tell me below. If you want more videos like this, practical, specific, no filler, subscribe and hit the bell. New videos go up every week, and if this one was useful to you, A thumbs up actually does help this channel reach more gardeners, so I appreciate it when you do. Go grow something good.